Hello, hello. Welcome back. This is Lisa Mitchell. This is week 4 of Teach from Your Soul. This is a good one. We're getting into that heart chakra. So take a moment, find yourself in a nice, comfortable place so you can just kind of disconnect from all the busyness, all the chatter of your mind, and really just become present for this next, 45 minutes to an hour or so as our time together. So nice and tall. Take a deep breath in. Sigh out. Good. A few more deep breaths. Really start to notice the inhales, the exhales as they occur. It's such a useful tool just for pulling you into just this moment right here, right now. Almost like your breath becomes your roots, really getting you here, getting you present. So take advantage of each and every breath. Just pulling you closer and closer to right here and right now. Alrighty. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You can let your eyes flutter open. And let's do this. All right, we are on chakra 4, Anahata, meaning unstruck, sometimes also defined as unhurt. And this chakra is so important because it's literally at the center of the 7 chakras, right? There's 3 below, there's 3 above. But I really like to think of Anahata as being right here in the heart center, this space of absolute joy and unconditional love, right? Since this chakra is located at the center of the chest, so that includes the heart, the cardiac plexus, the thymus glands, the lungs, the breast, it's often said to be the area where the physical and the spiritual meet. And I just love that. So like I mentioned, anahata meaning unstruck or unhurt. So this basically means that beneath any pain, beneath any grief, beneath any past experience that we may have had lies a very pure and spiritual place where only bliss exists, right? The heart chakra governs so much of our interactions of the external world, and really is just the regulator of all of those good feelings, those loving feelings, those feelings of devotion, feelings of compassion. It's wonderful. So the element of the heart chakra is air. The purpose is love and balance. And the color is green. As I mentioned, every chakra has its demon. So the demon here is grief, but also oftentimes negativity. So the basic rights of the 4th chakra are to love and be loved. The developmental stage when this is starting to really manifest is between 4 and 7 years of age. And of course, there are traumas that can really affect this chakra from being at its most ultimate balanced place, and that is abandonment, rejection, unacknowledged grief, sexual or physical abuse, shaming, betrayal, divorce, death of a loved one, or any abuses to any of the lower chakras like chakra 1, 2, and 3 that we've already went through. All right, so let's keep it going. When we're balanced in our heart chakra, we're just the type of person that's just like flowing with kindness, with tolerance, with joy. It's easy to forgive others. You're in a place of acceptance with yourself, that balanced, just overall balanced type personality, able to really not only love others and be compassionate with others, but also really self-loving and compassionate also with yourself. This characteristic of a balanced heart chakra also presents itself as having a strong immune system and just being an overall pretty healthy person. Altruistic, right? Very giving and empathetic, right? So these are some characteristics of a balanced heart chakra. It really, I don't know. A balanced heart chakra to me, it just allows you to be vulnerable when you're in pain, but also able to spread love when you're feeling joy. So it's just that perfect balance here. And of course, we can have deficiencies. Oh, deficient heart chakra can cause us to have really strong emotions of anger and jealousy and grief and loathing towards yourself and others. Oftentimes, they're withdrawn or antisocial. Depression is common when anahata is deficient. There's that fear of relationships and of intimacy. Narcissism, that can be definitely a deficiency in the heart chakra. Overall sense of loneliness, and just being just downright judgmental and critical of not only yourself but also of others. These are signs of deficient heart chakras. And then, of course, with everything, we can be excessive, right? Oh, geez, excessive. We're demanding. We have poor boundaries. We are jealous and clingy to people that we're, close to or in relationships with. We may also be very overly sacrificing, right? We're just kind of running ourselves, to the wire, just overly sacrificing ourselves. And also codependent. That is also a sign of an excessive heart chakra. All right, so getting into some of these teaching tips. But first, just reiterating just a little bit more of the heart chakra. I like to spend a little bit more time with this one just because I feel like myself as a teacher, I play a lot of focal point in my yoga classes based around the heart chakra, right? We all want to feel love. We all want to share love with others. We all want to have happiness and experiences that are magical and all the moments that come with that type of a vibe or that type of a feeling, right? So yoga, knows that we are all beings, right? Part of yoga is just this like feeling of being energy, that this connection with our body and our heart and our minds, right? It's all part of the same thing, the same vital life force. So having said that, when our hearts and our minds are engaged in the asana practice, the heart and the mind are also opened up and liberated, accordingly. So just something to think about. I know I do back bends in every single class. Lately, I've been doing, more than one opportunity to do back bends, multiple back bend sequences, because I just feel it's so important. They're so, I don't know, a heart opening class, emphasis on the heart chakra. I feel like it gives people like a lot of energy, a lot of good feelings, just, kind of like that fresh perspective that we all want. Also, in terms of the heart chakra, the organ that's associated with the heart chakra is actually the skin, with an emphasis on the hands, right? So you can think about how we communicate feelings of love. We hug, we touch, massage, all of these things are nurturing and caring and loving, and we all experience this through touch. So when people have really awakened their heart chakra, they often make really great teachers and healers due to this high level of just like loving and healing energy and this deep inner peace that really kind of emanates from people that, have really been opened and balanced through this chakra, right? So, one way to heal anahata is by practicing forgiveness and understanding. It's only when we forgive that we can free our hearts and really be open. And it's only then that we can start to move forward. So we have to let go of our old hurts and our old pains so that we can make room for love, right? We have to make room. Sometimes it doesn't always, happen so seamlessly. Sometimes we have to allow it and make the space for it to happen. And trust me, I know forgiveness is hard, right? It doesn't always come naturally even, or even willingly for a lot of people. But when our suffering is so strong, sometimes it gets even harder to find the strength to forgive. But I have a couple things to remind yourself of when you're having a hard time forgiving, because that forgiveness is really what it takes to heal this area of the heart. You have to remind yourself that forgiveness doesn't insinuate that the pain wasn't real or that shit, doesn't matter. It absolutely was real, and your experiences absolutely matter. However, forgiveness opens you up to see the learning opportunity that sometimes the difficult experiences can provide for us, right? So it gives that fresh perspective where we can start to look at our pain and our hurts as really just our learning experiences. So we can end the victim mentality, right? We can start to reclaim our lives, find acceptance, and move not only onward, but also upward. All right. So having said that, let's get into some of these teaching tips. Create community. Oh, so I feel like a lot of these teaching tips are going to kind of really piggyback on this. Several of them are going to piggyback on this sense of community, right? So even though yoga is a practice that suggests really going within and finding the connection to ourselves, basically, there's nothing wrong with connection before class, or when people start to get to know each other at a space or in a community. It really can transform the whole mood of the practitioner, the whole mood, the whole vibe of the space that you're teaching in. Because what I found is that when the teachers know the students as well as the students knowing each other, there a bond starts to form, right? And this is what is imperative to really create that feeling of a strong community. These bonds have to be established. So there's definitely ways that you can foster this area of community and this sense of relationship building as a teacher. So for one, be sure to introduce yourself at the beginning of the class, and when possible, make a special point to connect with anyone that might be new to the studio, right? Or maybe new to the practice in general, right? That goes a long way. That just acknowledgement, that small conversation that lets you know that I know that you're new here and I'm going to do my best to make you have a wonderful experience and for you to be part of this community. It's very, very important. Walking into any unfamiliar space, it can be very daunting for people. So you just want to make sure everyone feels welcomed and comfortable. And that's a strong asset of a great community. There's definitely an intimate experience that comes with feeling like you belong. And it has so many long-lasting benefits to our heart chakra when we feel as though we belong, when the community is ours. So as I mentioned, I think it was in chakra 2, that remembering people's names, speaking to them, by name, perhaps during or after class, and always thanking them for their efforts, right? Make sure that they know that their efforts are not going unnoticed. It's such an important part of just building that sense of community. And within community, sometimes things can get a little bit cliquey. So try to avoid that at all costs. If you thought cliques were a thing of your past and only happened in middle school and high school, then I'm here to tell you that you're probably wrong, because cliques are really just tightly knit groups of individuals who socialize and exclude others, right? This happens everywhere. And I hate to break it to you, if you haven't noticed it already, this behavior often occurs in yoga studios all around the world, right? So a close-knit group of students and teachers can appear very unwelcoming. So again, we're trying to build community, but when this exclusivity, this vibe of exclusivity is happening to outsiders who aren't exactly in the popular group or in the community, just yet, they're still new. If you can remember how that felt when perhaps you felt excluded or you felt like you weren't welcomed into a group of people, like it's just not a great feeling, right? And then just ask yourself, have you ever even practiced at a studio, perhaps, that did not feel very welcoming? Or have you felt that there were cliques that you were clearly not part of, right? It's not a good feeling. I've definitely felt that way just in my years of bouncing around to different studios, and it's not a good feeling. So repeated feedback that we get from customers at our studio across all of our locations involves the family feel of our studios, right? It feels like a family. It feels like a community when they walk into the space. And I attribute this really to the vibe as my key factor in the success of my studios. I 100% absolutely believe that it's the vibe and it's the community that makes the studios that we have what they are. We are not the fanciest studio. We aren't the high-tech studio. We don't have the fancy locker rooms and showers and all those things. We don't have any of that. In fact, I feel like our studio is like the no frills version of a yoga studio, yet it's the community. It doesn't even matter. When the community is strong and that feeling is welcoming and inclusive, it goes a long way, right? So the vibe of creating that community is so important. And it really has to be perpetuated by not only myself or the owners, but it has to be the teachers and the staff, they become such a core part of making a community what it is. So just make sure everybody's on the same page, that everybody is really there for the greater good of creating that positive intention for everyone that walks in. So creating that sense of community really touches the hearts of students, right? So we're talking about the heart chakra and that community feel that doesn't feel exclusive or doesn't feel cliquey. That's going to get to the heart, and that is going to get people to keep coming back. It's going to get people to keep showing up to your classes. And, I can't encourage you more to play a part in cultivating that feeling. All right, moving right along, kind of piggybacking off of the first two is really supporting the community, right? And in supporting the community, I'm talking about supporting other teachers in your community. So just your mere showing up on the mat is one of the easiest ways that you can show your appreciation to fellow teachers, right? They actually really like it. I know I love it when teachers show up to my class, It makes, I don't know, it just feels very supported, right? So attending classes and supporting your community is a way of representing professionalism. It's a way of showing collaboration. It's a way of educating yourself and showing an appreciation of your local community. So, as yoga teachers, we have to be all inclusive. We have to be one tribe, if I even dare to say the word tribe, but we are all in this together, right? That's what it has to be, regardless of the style or the affiliation or whatever it is. Yoga is all inclusive. And there's always something you can learn by practicing with different teachers, right? So maybe you practice at studios where you also teach. That doesn't go unnoticed. Trust me, the practitioners like to see when teachers are in the class. The owners like to see that the teachers are practicing at the community as well, right? It shows that you value the community and that you want to be a part of it. So it's very powerful. Students love it. They love to see you in the room with them. It really validates the essence of the practice for them in a lot of ways. And it's just, it's nice to see that the teachers are practicing what they preach and that yoga is part of their daily routine as well. So lead by example, right? Embody the energy that you want others to receive. The more we see other teachers as resources, the more you can shift from the perspective of scarcity and instead into the perspective that you are enough, right? So it's all kind of piggybacking, letting go of those feelings of disconnect or discontent or jealousy or anything like that. Like teachers, we're all in this together. Support each other. It's so important. So you want to be interdependent, right? You want to be interdependent, not independent, as part of this yoga community. And if we can all get on the same page with this, I just think that the overall yoga community of this country will just greatly, greatly improve. All right, so we're going to keep it moving. Seek a mentor. So seeking a mentor, right? This is a great way to develop yourself, not only personally, but also professionally as a yoga teacher. So, it's a great way to share knowledge. It's a great way to share experience. It's a great way to share expertise. So this mentoring relationship, where whoever that, fits that role for you, who you can see as a mentor, is just make sure there's that mutual trust and respect between you two. There has to be a lot of great communication for a mentor relationship to really work. But when it does work, and you guys have that mutual trust, that mutual respect for each other, it could be an amazing, amazing thing. I mean, how I see a mentorship working is that you find a teacher that's more senior of a teacher than you, and you guys meet on a regular and consistent basis to exchange ideas. You guys can discuss things that show up for you in your classes, progress that you're making. You can set goals for yourself as a teacher or wellness entrepreneur or whatever it is that you're doing with yourself. And this relationship is really, really important because it can really inspire you. It can inspire you on this path of yoga, right? Preferably, like I said, find someone that is also a yoga teacher that perhaps has a little bit more skin in the game, a little bit more, experience, more years perhaps than you. So experienced teachers, they can really help you connect to this deeper lineage of the practice by transmitting their love and their understanding of the practice And then you can start to recognize some of those patterns perhaps with yourself. Over time, your mentor will notice your particular patterns, those samskaras, those negative pathways, those negative habitual thoughts. They can notice that for you as well, and perhaps bring that to the surface, expose those samskaras a little bit, so that we can start really moving forward and working through that. So a mentor can be very, very effective on that, right? So a mentor, once you guys have this relationship, they can start to notice these little things about not only your teaching, but also in your practice, right? They might notice that you're, fidgeting in Shavasana, or they might notice that you say a lot in your teaching. I know I can get guilty of that sometimes. Or pointing out that you favor, one side of your shoulders and then the other in Chaturanga. So it's these like little things that someone close enough to you is starting to notice that maybe someone with just a regular eye or isn't viewing you as a mentee wouldn't notice such minute things, right? It's just a great way to, find someone that's loving to you and can bring certain things to your attention, right? This process is very useful in helping your own self-awareness to kind of cultivate that self-awareness and to notice any of the patterns that are really just holding you back from your truest potential. And that is the role of the mentor. So make an effort to connect with the person often that you think is the good fit for you. And of course, make sure that they understand and agree to be the mentor. We're not just like secretly stalking out a teacher that we really like. There are some experienced yoga teachers that actually do mentoring. So if you can find that, that'd be wonderful. Otherwise, I would just, talk to the teacher that you think is a good fit and just, discuss, is this an option? And obviously their time is valuable. So you guys would have to figure out a way that felt, mutually respectful and, equitable on both parts for that. All right. And I think it's a good way, as myself mentoring other, yoga teachers, I learn so much, and I say this even in my teacher trainings, like you guys think that you learn so much from me, but in actuality, I learn so much from you. So a mentor, definitely has a lot that they gain in the process as well. Alrighty, teach from love, even to the difficult students. So I did chat about this a bit in our free Teach from Your Soul. So I'll elaborate on this again. Just try to understand those who you're teaching, right? There's always going to be students that are a little bit more challenging, whether they're brand new, whether they just want to do their own thing, whether, whether they came there for one particular purpose and maybe it doesn't align necessarily with your purpose. It doesn't really matter. You have to be that strong influence for the students that show up into your classes, right? You not only have to love to teach, but you have to love every person that you teach. And I know that that can be a challenge at times, right? But that's what makes us grow. That's what makes us stronger. I like to remind myself every time a newbie comes to my class or shows up that we have that opportunity to make them love yoga. That's a lot of responsibility. We have to make them love yoga. We have to make them want to show up. Part of that is that whole community aspect, but part of that is really just the energy surrounding, a newer person. Like, how are we approaching them? Are we approaching them as a hindrance or an annoyance to the class? Or are we approaching them with love? It's a lot of pressure, because if you don't make them feel as though they're wanted there, they may not ever show up, whether it's to your class, whether it's to the yoga mat at all, ever again. So it's a lot of responsibility, and I take it very, very seriously, right? I take it very seriously how important it is to lead with love and compassion, even for the difficult students, right? Just kind of piggybacking off of teaching new students, I find that a lot of times brand new teachers, like right out of teacher training, are often advised to teach beginner classes, right? There's this, I guess, notion that perhaps beginner classes are easier to teach. But for me, I would say that teaching a beginner's class or beginner series can be the hardest, although very rewarding, no doubt. But it's very imperative that you let go of your perception of a perfect class. Anytime you're teaching any student, regardless of the experience level, but in particular, when you're teaching beginners, it's like, I don't know. you may find people that maybe have never or haven't been like in any type of physical fitness in years, so that presents its own challenges. Maybe people have a very superficial understanding of yoga. Maybe people have very limited receptivity to the practice, like they're not really sure if this is something that they really even like, right? So you always have to remember to be honest and straightforward, especially when you're working with beginners. Make that great eye contact, show them that they care, show them that you want what's best for them. And I like to remind myself, and I also say this oftentimes in my class, remind yourselves that we were all beginners once, right? We were all beginners once. And beginner or not, there's always going to be those students who just won't get what you're trying to explain, no matter how many ways and how many times you explain it. There's always going to be those people, but you have to understand that you can't force or rush this yoga practice or this process on anyone, right? It is their practice more than it is your class. And just piggybacking off of, what I've mentioned in the free version, that if you really, really, really start to embrace that concept of fitting the yoga to the student and not the other way around, then every student should have a totally different look in practice according to his or her physical abilities and desires, right? And they have to let go of that pressure that they need to get it right. Sometimes we think that, everything has to be so, by the book correct, and we don't take into consideration all of the individuality that really comes with everyone that shows up on their mats. Even though we're in a group setting, we're in a group class together, 9 times out of 10, if you're teaching, there's a group element to it. But unlike other group fitness classes and things of that nature, it's still very, very much individualized. And that's very important to understand. So teaching from love really means practicing unconditional compassion for all human beings, even those difficult people, because they, in reality, are our greatest teachers. You just have to alter the way you think about them. So handles all individuals with kindness, compassion, and care. And in reality, you're balancing your own heart chakra in the process. All righty, let's keep going. Similar to teaching, from love, comes a slightly different take on this teaching from love idea. So you may have heard the quote, "Do what you love and the money will follow," right? There's no doubt that yoga has made it to the mainstream in this country. It is a multi-billion-dollar business. But classes, at this point, classes are held in health clubs and hospitals during lunch hour, in corporate situations. Teaching yoga certainly seems like a safe and a long-term occupation, right? One would think. Studies show that there are full-time yoga teachers grossing more than $100,000 a year. A select few are even making, multiple six figures, although the majority of yoga teachers in reality are making about $25,000 to $50,000 a year, right? So my advice for you to move through this with love is to love what you do, love it enough to do it well. And that means you have to be committed. You have to be purposeful. You have to go into teaching for the love of the practice. So if you become a yoga teacher for some monetary desire, then I can tell you right now that you're going to get quickly discouraged and probably pretty drained, and you're probably going to destroy your passion. I've seen it time and time again. When a yoga teacher's salary becomes like their main source of income, meaning like a full-time yoga teacher, when you just like, this is what you're doing, you're teaching your like 15 to 30 classes a week, you're doing your thing, there's a lot of stress that comes to that. There's a lot of attachment to now the fruits of your actions, right? Which is kind of anti-yoga in some ways, right? If we're going by the Bhagavad Gita, where we're doing things without any desire for an outcome, without any, attachment to the fruits of our actions. But of course, we have to live. We need money, right? So you have to understand that sometimes these lines can get a little bit cross. They get a little bit cross when teaching yoga becomes their main source of income. So just know that. I've also met a whole spectrum of teachers that really just teach purely for the joy of it. right? They're not dependent on the money for getting, for getting paid as a yoga teacher. It's not their main motivation. Oftentimes these people are people that have other jobs, or maybe they have a significant other who has a well enough job that all they have to do is teach a couple classes a week, or maybe they have their full-time gig, but they teach a couple of classes a week for, a little extra spending money, or maybe they want that free yoga membership, because oftentimes, at least with us, and I would say in most of my experience talking to other business owners and studio owners, that when a teacher teaches consistently, like not a sub, but is on the schedule and is part of the teaching staff, they generally get to practice at the studio for free. So for some people, that's motivation enough to teach 1 or 2 classes a week somewhere just to be able to practice, right? So you just have to be clear about that, right? You have to be able to sustain the passion, right, that got you into teaching in the first place. And sometimes if money becomes your main motivation, it just gets a little bit tricky. So I would recommend for people, if you decide to be a full-time yoga teacher, make sure you're in a position where self-employment can truly be an option. If you have dependents, children and whatnot, or you're taking care of your parents or a family member or something like that. If you have a lot of debt, being self-employed can seem very scary and perhaps a bit risky. That's just the reality of it. But do not lose heart. You will have to proceed a little bit more cautiously if you fit into that, position where being self-employed has, there's things that you need to consider, like your debt and your dependence and things like that. I tell people often, don't quit your day jobs yet, and to start slowly. Start slowly. Build your classes, 1 or 2 classes a week. Teaching with love is not easy, but we all know that it's important, right? Like any professional, teaching yoga calls for a particular set of skills. It calls for a set of talent. It calls for drive. So if you're in it for the long haul, with true passion for the practice and that desire to share the wonderful benefits to others that show up, it will be one of the toughest jobs that you will ever love. And I can go on and on about ways to make more money as a yoga teacher. I've had a lot of success in being a yoga teacher and being a studio owner and whatnot. But I think that would probably be best for another time, perhaps my next online course, and we'll see. All right, so we'll keep going for now. Offer guidance. Excuse me. So offering guidance, since touch is a big part of the heart chakra, we can say that offering adjustments or offering assist can be one way that we offer guidance, right? There is always opportunities, even with intermediate or advanced students, there's always an opportunity to help them get a little bit deeper. And assisting and adjusting students is a great way to inspire them to maybe expand a little bit in their practice, to release some tension in their postures, to feel more open in their practice. But it can also be a quick way to get people to not come back to class if you ignore them, right? So you want to offer guidance. You absolutely have to offer them guidance. And I'm not saying that you have to be super hands-on if that's not something you're comfortable with, or maybe that's not the style of the practice that you're teaching, but you can still pay close attention and offer guidance with your words, with your body, showing samples of the postures, whatever it is. There's always ways to show some guidance. That is the reason why people come to classes. They can easily, live stream, they can YouTube yoga, a yoga class. They could get a yoga DVD. There's a million ways that people can practice in the comforts of their home, but they come to a studio space and they come with a real live teacher because they are seeking some guidance, right? So just because a student may look like they're doing really well in their posture doesn't always mean that they won't benefit from your help still, right? So don't ignore, the most advanced practitioner either, because there's always something that we can guide them on too, right? There are so many reasons that teachers offer assists and adjustments, and many things, your eye will start to recognize the more you start to teach. So a few guidelines on how assist and adjust can help. So assist and adjust is guidance that we're offering can remove a student from an unsafe position that could potentially lead to injury. You can give energetic information about a pose. You can increase a practitioner's awareness of their body. Sometimes people come to yoga when they're still new and they just don't really have that much body awareness. And that's just, to no fault of their own. It's just when you're not moving in the ways that we do in the yoga practice, you just don't think of your body in that way. Offering encouragement, when we offer guidance, when we show people that we're there for them, it's very encouraging. It can offer some clarification. Like say you're explaining something in so many words and it's just not clicking. Sometimes we can offer some more specific assist or an adjustment that can just, kind of give some clarity to a person that may not be, understanding the first time or so. Sometimes it takes multiple modalities for people to really get the point. And sometimes it just feels good. Sometimes getting an adjustment that feels good is a great way to deepen or stretch. And honestly, sometimes I felt like I've gotten a little massage in the yoga practice. And if it's done with the right intention and if it's done with confident hands, then those types of assists and adjustments can be amazing, right? But there are definitely things that you need to be aware of. And I'll put this in part of the bonus, the bonus because it's that important. There are certain areas that are considered danger zones when dealing with a body. For example, pay extreme care to the cervical spine and the lower back, the sacroiliac joint included. So, never put pressure directly on the spine in any assist. Never put pressure directly on the spine, ever, ever, ever. Just don't want to do that. When giving assist, notice the foundation of the pose, which is always from the ground up. So sometimes our feet are on the ground, sometimes our hands are on the ground, sometimes our backs are on the ground, sometimes our heads are on the ground. Obviously, it really depends on the asana, but the foundation is always from the ground up, depending on the pose, right? So if something looks, if someone's in a warrior one and their hips look like completely wonky and not like squared forward as much as they could be, I wouldn't go and adjust the hips because I would think of the foundation first. I would look down at their feet. And chances are if I adjust their feet or give them some guidance on a different feet position, just adjusting the feet will inevitably adjust the hips to be in a more accurate position for a warrior one. That's just one example. You also want to notice, you just want to really fine tune your eye to notice very common danger signs. For example, like your knees going over your toes in warrior positions. You want to have the knee right above the ankle or perhaps the knee even behind the ankle, but the knee should not be exceeding the ankle. That is not safe placement for the kneecaps. You also don't want the shoulders cranked up by a person's ears in a standing position, right? You want to release tension. We don't come to yoga to create tension. We want to release it. Sometimes you see students that are very, very flexible to the point where their joints are hyperextended and hyperflexible, right? So you need to focus your adjustments on teaching them to really connect with their strength, right? Because overly flexible people are often just kind of lacking their own strength, whether it's their core, whether it's their muscular strength, whatever it is. So just knowing that that oftentimes, really flexible people have a lack of strength engagement or muscular engagement. So that is something that you should definitely notice. Make sure you feel stable in your own posture. So make sure you're stable and grounded in your feet and in your stance before you assist someone else to be more stable and grounded, right? So know your own stability and how important that can be, because it's your stability that's really the key to making a person feel safe and effective in whatever assist that you're giving them. Of course, if you feel any resistance from the person, you stop and observe. Always err on the side of caution. Always, always, always. Oftentimes in our teacher training, I suggest that physical assist should be done to students that you know or whose practices you're familiar with. And I think that's always a good idea, because with that, there's just a better understanding of how that particular body can be approached in a more safe and effective way, So if you want to practice some new cool assist that you just learned, maybe you just went to an assisting workshop, or maybe you got a really juicy assist and you just want to try it on someone else, right? I always suggest trying those things, experimenting a little bit with a peer, perhaps a fellow yoga teacher first, right? That way the person can give you some real, valuable feedback and can inform you on like how to, perhaps get a little bit deeper, or, whatever it is that you need. If you need more pressure, if you need less pressure, if it was higher, place your hands higher, place your hands lower, whatever it is, like let your, friends, your peers, your fellow yoga teachers be your guinea pigs. Yoga teachers love messing around with yoga. So I don't think anyone is going to mind, hey, can we, grab some coffee? I want to go over a couple of assists with you, like that I just learned or that someone did to me and it was amazing. Who's going to say no to that? No yoga teacher that I know would say no to that. And then it's a learning opportunity for them too, right? It's this constant give and take of love and great information. So I really think that's important. You don't necessarily want your students to be your guinea pigs. Try it out on people that you know first. And just acknowledge that, not all teacher trainings place a lot of emphasis on physical assist. Maybe they attend more on your verbal cues, being impeccable with your word, all of that. So if you're not trained or you're not confident in physical assist as a yoga teacher, then I would suggest that you find some continuing education that really gets a little bit more, obviously, exploratory and in-depth than I am right now, because this isn't an assisting, course, but I'm just kind of going over some of the logistics of it. But it's really important that you have a chance to touch real people, definitely, in my opinion, for a topic like this, right? It's just, start small, work on a particular assist that you start to get really comfortable with. And that's how you build your arsenal of assists that you can do. And just also know that over time, your eye, gets to be more trained as a yoga teacher. You start to see those common things that are repetitive amongst people, and you'll start to notice it right away. You might not notice it, for a while, but you'll start to notice that in pyramid pose, a lot of people are like this, or in warrior one, this is a common thing that I see, and you start to see it and you can guide the students accordingly, the sooner and the quicker that your eye starts to really notice things. So it's a wonderful thing. Also knowing that that people come to the mat with all types of stories, so being trauma informed is always a good idea. Asking permission to touch, especially if it's someone that you don't know or maybe new to your class, being aware of injuries. I find that people, if they have a particular injury, they're pretty good at letting the teacher know so that they can modify as necessary. Once in a while, I'll notice someone within the first few minutes of class that looks as though they have an injury. And if they haven't told me, then I go up to them and I'll just whisper, is there an injury with your wrist, or is there something going on with your shoulder, or whatever it is that I'm noticing. And then we have like a brief conversation about that. But, just being aware. And to be trauma sensitive, to me, the easiest way to just know whether or not you're being a trauma informed yoga teacher is to simply offer choices. Close your eyes, or if you're not comfortable, don't close your eyes. Like there's so many things, like, giving people the choice, that's very, very empowering. And it's just a way to show, compassion and empathy and love for the people that show up to your class. All right, moving right along. Be aware of the energy, right? So much of Hatha yoga refers to the energy body. So understanding this energy body, these can just really lead to improvement in stability and flexibility and alignment. It removes obstacles so that your energy can be flowing very freely during the yoga practice and really just in life in general. So with this perspective, we can think about physical assist or any type of assist that we offer in a yoga class as being energetic, right? Energetic in the sense that there's really no separation between physical and energetic self, right? Our physical bodies, our energetic bodies, they're really intertwined. We experience them directly related, and that's just the reality of it. So having said that, we have to tap into these life force energies, right? So prana is often considered life force. Maybe you hear it called chi, or maybe you hear it called, I can't really think of any other beside chi and prana right now, but it's basically this vital life force. And when we start to think of, kind of even more specifically with energy flow and life force, we have this concept in yoga that's called vayus. And vayus translates as winds. Sometimes you see vayus translated as the way in which the wind or the energy flows, right? So all of that becomes really important when you start to look at people in their postures. It's also very informative in terms of what assist and what guidance you can offer the students as well. So there are 5 vayus of prana. All have very subtle yet distinct energetic qualities, particularly in the yoga postures, that include specific functions and directions of the area of the flow of energy. So it's so much of the practice, when you have this awareness of the energy, so much can change for your practice. It's a wonderful thing to start to cultivate. Even if you never say the word vayus in your class, I believe you should be speaking of the energy, absolutely. So giving students that basic awareness of the vayus and the way the energy flows really helps to deepen their body and their breath awareness, which is really such an important essence of the whole yoga practice. So I'm going to start with prana vayu. Prana vayu is situated in the head. So it's centered in the third eye, and its energy pervades the chest region. So this flow of prana vayu is always upward. So it nourishes the brain and the eyes, and it governs reception of all things, food, air, sense, and thoughts. So in the yoga practice, the flow of prana vayu exists in which body parts present the highest point. So anytime, like if you just can see where the energy flows, the highest part of the body is the prana vayu. So if you're thinking of Tadasana or mountain pose, prana vayu would be rising out of the head, right? Because in Tadasana, our head is the highest point of the shape. So prana vayu would be in that direction of the head. And I'm going to put a lot of this in our bonus section, so don't worry. Apana vayu really interplays with prana vayu because it's generally in the opposite position. So in Tadasana, for example, prana vayu is through the head. So apana vayu would be in the feet, which is a very grounding, a very rooting down energy. So it's situated particularly in the pelvic floor, and its energy pervades the lower abdomen. So since this energy is downward and out, apana vayu is known to nourish the organs of digestion, reproduction, and elimination. So when I mean elimination of all substances from the body, carbon monoxide, urine, stool, menstrual blood, and so on. Apana vayu is grounding downward energy. Then we have Vyana vayu, which is situated in the heart and lungs and flows throughout the entire body. So the flow of Vyana vayu moves from the center of the body to the periphery, right? So in the yoga postures, this presents itself through the limbs, your extremities, right? So in Tadasana, we have apana vayu in our feet, the grounding down. We have prana vayu rising up through the head. And then Vyana vayu is seen through the arms being active, the fingers ignited, perhaps the quadriceps lifting up away from the kneecap. All of this engagement that you see even in just a simple standing pose, it's not really simple, but in Tadasana, the extremities, your limbs, since it's moving through the periphery, that is Vyana vayu. So it governs circulation of all the substances through the body, and it actually helps to assist the other vayus. So it's very important. So just piggybacking off of assists and adjustments, there's so many assists and adjustments that you can do with just, these 3 vayus in mind. There's 2 more that I'm going to go through, but how many times is just feeling grounded through your feet, someone reaching your heels closer to the floor in down dog, or, putting some pressure on your front big toe and in a pyramid or whatever, just sometimes when the teacher just grounds us a little bit more, it's such a simple but yet effective way to be assisted. Same thing with Vyana. How many times do we see practitioners, or maybe even in ourselves, you could be in a half moon pose, Ardha Chandrasana, but that top arm is super limp. Your fingers are just kind of like dangling. And if a teacher can come and create some length, create some reach to the extremities, create some like energy through the fingers, like the energy is moving beyond just your fingertips, it's a powerful way to assist. And it's simple and it's easy and it doesn't have to be hard, you know? And that's something that I've realized probably the hard way, that life doesn't have to be hard, right? So that's very important to get that. All right, so moving right along, we have Udana Vayu, which is situated in the throat and has a circular flow around the neck. So it functions to hold us up, right? So this governs speech. It's an area of growth, an area of self-expression. So this in yoga postures is actually present way less, but it can represent itself as breath and sweat because it's like this up and out type of energy. But there are definitely poses that do have Udana Vayu very clearly. Anything that allows your throat to be open basically would be this up and outward through the throat energy. So for example, Ustrasana or camel pose, when you're in the position and your head's back and your throat is very open, that's a very strong Udana type of energy. Same thing with upward facing bow. You know, when your throat is open and your head is hanging down, that's a very Udana like representation in a posture. But again, not all poses have that emphasis on that throat being open. So if that's the case, Udana would just be your breath or your sweat because it's still like this outward energy. And then next we have Samana Vayu, which is so important to feel stable in yoga. It is situated in the abdomen with its energy that's centered around the navel. So this flow of Samana Vayu moves from the periphery of the body now to the center. So in Tadasana, if we're thinking back to our Tadasana, Samana would be evident through the squeezing in of the navel, that pulling in and up of the navel, and also that squeezing in of your inner thighs, right? Not everyone's squeezing their inner thighs in Tadasana, but if you're following the energy of Samana, the inner thighs would be pulling in towards the center. There's a lot of emphasis on this midline of your body, this like area that's kind of like your center, that we're always in that state of squeezing in. So Samana Vayu is also governing over our digestion, as well as food, air, experiences, emotions, and thoughts. So I definitely think that this being aware of the energy is such an important and useful concept as a yoga teacher. It really helps to increase that I, that you'll create that I as a yoga teacher, where you start to fine tune and see things energetically very, very easily. So, just to really implement this right away, just go about your teaching, observing students, and ask yourself, does he or she need more grounding in the pose, right? Apana. Can they use a little bit more lift in their posture? That would be prana. Can they be more centered or squeezed in or engaged? That's samana. Or all the body parts, reaching in an expressed posture. Like, are they reaching and they're expressive in the posture? That would be vyana. Is he or she breathing, right? If all else fails, then that is udana, that breath. Are they breathing, right? So in every posture, you're going to find sometimes it can be a little bit tricky. Sometimes, it seems like more than one vayu can be present in a posture, but, it's something that you'll definitely start to notice and start to see that they exist in all the poses. And that is definitely something that you can speak to your students. Okay. Very similar yet different, instructing pranayama. So breathing is such a vital function of life. It's such a vital part of yoga. When you go to the 8 limbs of yoga, pranayama is one of them. So it has to be attended to. We have to have some understanding, some offering of this to our students. We refer oftentimes, at least in the vinyasa or the ashtanga style, of this pranayama, like this ujjayi breath, ujjayi, just, when all else fails, if a student is in class and they're breathing fuller and deeper than their natural breath is, if they're breathing to the point where there's some type of audible sound to it, then boom, they're breathing, they're engaging in some pranayama. It doesn't always have to be you know, overly complicated or overly dogmatic in any way. Just look for those things, that the breath, the inhales and exhales are full and deep and conscious, and that there's some sound quality to it. And that's some key elements to very simple and watered down pranayama. So just kind of piggybacking off a little bit more about pranayama. So prana itself is a Sanskrit word that means life force, and ayama means extending or stretching. So the word pranayama translates to the control of your life force. It's really just, you know, kind of like this control, this extension of your breath. So every cell in your body needs oxygen to function properly. So it's no surprise that research shows us that a regular practice of controlled breathing really helps to decrease the effects of stress, and, you know, really just to increase the overall physical and mental health. And that's what, you know, these benefits are very commonly seen to anybody that practices yoga for, you know, a consistent and extended amount of time. And since the element of chakra 4 is air, we can relate Anahata chakra to simply the breath, this giving and this receiving of air that's constantly going back and forth amongst everyone around us. Like, we're breathing in, we're breathing out, we're sharing air, we're giving this life force to each other. So it's really just like an act of giving and receiving love. Breath is so essential to life. It's the first thing we do when we're born, and it's the last thing we do when we die, right? That is just crazy. So in between that time, we take about 500 million breaths. However, without a mindful yoga practice, you may not pay attention to hardly any of them. The air might just go in and it might just go out without any regard, without any consciousness of it. But yoga really helps us to recognize and to realize that the mind, the body, and the breath are so intimately connected, and they have very strong influences on each other. So learning to breathe consciously and, you know, and really with a greater awareness is such a valuable tool in helping, you know, to restore balance in your mind and your body. So as a yoga teacher, it is our job to incorporate some type of breath work or pranayama as part of the practice. It's an essential limb of that eightfold path, and it should not be ignored. So there's a ton of research done on pranayama, and just some of the benefits that have been shown time and time again is that pranayama decreases feelings of stress and being overwhelmed. It reduces feelings of anxiety and depression. It stabilizes blood pressure. It boosts your energy levels, and it increases your ability to relax. So not only does it give you energy, but it helps you sleep better as well. So it's really just an important part of our energetic system. When we go back to our sheaths, our 5 sheaths, pranayama and this conscious breath connects us to our 3rd sheath, which is Manamaya Kosha, or the Mind Sheath. So this kosha is important because it involves the mind as it relates to everyday living, and basically our basic interpretation of our life and our experiences. So Manamaya Kosha can be either useful or detrimental depending on how we train our minds. So fortunately, the yoga practice is designed to bring our, you know, Manamaya Kosha into a higher form of function. And pranayama is really the useful tool that is required to calm the mind, right? So yoga teaches us that when the breath is erratic, that the mind is generally erratic as well. So control of the breath is so instrumental in balancing Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, and Manamaya Kosha combined. So this is like that combination of your physical, your tangible self with your, you know, with your deeper layers, and just now getting into your mind. So it's, you know, that mind, that body connection that's really facilitated through breath. All right, so this is a good one coming up. I just love this chakra. We have teach with vulnerability. So this process of being vulnerable is such a human experience. It's such an expression of our humanness, right? And it gives other permission to feel vulnerable as well. It gives other people to feel whatever it is that they need to feel when we are able to be an example of vulnerability. Have you ever heard the term that the issues are in the tissues? Have you ever experienced or witnessed an emotional breakthrough during a yoga practice, or even a cry in Shavasana, or maybe like an ultimate feeling of joy when you wake up from Shavasana? Right? So if that's ever happened to you, or if you've ever experienced it with someone else, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. So being vulnerable does not imply that you use your role as a yoga teacher to overshare about your personal life, or making everything about me, or not having those boundaries that are appropriate to students. But on the contrary, it invites you to express your authentic journey through your yoga and your yoga practice. So it's almost like it illuminates the path for others by being honest and authentic about sharing your path. So just know that if you teach or do anything in this world with this huge wall around you, your students are going to feel it. So you have to be open. You have to be able to create these spaces of transformation for others, and the only way that we can do that is by our own vulnerability, our own fostering of trust and honest communication. So when you're vulnerable as a teacher, students will more likely be vulnerable with you. Right? So being vulnerable also includes the ability to feel connected and to listen fully without being caught up in your own mental chatter and your own ego. It's not about that at all. Your vulnerability, when we're able to be vulnerable, it doesn't just benefit, the people in your class, but it's really something that helps you heal too. It's allowing yourself to be seen. And sometimes that openness of your presence is such a great gift to other people. It's one of the greatest gifts that you can honestly give to your students and give to yourself, so you can really just understand yourself and learn about yourself even more. So teaching with vulnerability. Took me a long time to get comfortable with that, but it's a process, and you just go through it, and there's no rush. All right. Now we have learn to share. The greatest gift of having knowledge is the ability to share this knowledge with others. So important. I live by that. What's the point of having knowledge if you're not sharing with others? So know that in yoga, there is no yours or mine. So just let that language go. Let go of the thoughts that, other teachers are stealing your sequences or your ideas, and just let that go. Make peace with sharing and inspiring others as often as you need to, right? And inspiration and sharing is a wonderful thing. There's no reason to be angry about that. Also create a mentality of abundance, right? And practice non-attachment, right? So it's so beautiful to take a class and be inspired to later share a flow, a sequence, or a quote even that maybe another teacher has said. So think of this imitation as such a great expression of admiration. So even if a teacher, quote unquote, steals your sequence, the exciting thing about being a yoga teacher is that no one can be you. And that was such an important lesson that I have learned. Like, I can have someone come to my class and completely, take the sequence that I do, like literally 100% take the sequence, teach it. You can use my words, you can quote me verbatim, but it still won't be the same. It will not be the same. It will be received differently. The teacher will have, no matter what, even if you're saying the same thing, they have their own little twists and takes on things. I mean, if you ever go into a Bikram yoga class, I mean, the sequence never changes. The teachers have a script, but still there are some teachers that affect the practice in a way that's different than others. And that's just a perfect example of that, right? So let go of that feeling that you have the rights of something, or that other teachers are copying your style or whatever it is. Just let that go. Honor your uniqueness of who you are, but give kudos to those who inspire you. So that's like my main thing. If you're going to take a quote, or you're going to do something that someone else, kind of inspired you to do, it's always nice to give kudos. Like, oh, I took Stephanie's class on Monday and she read this quote and it really affected me, so I want to share it with you. Or one of my favorite teachers says it like this, or whatever it is. It's nothing wrong with doing that. I think that's a great thing to give kudos to others, right? So express your teachings freely, give credit where credit is due, but know that you don't have any agenda or need for accolades of your teaching. Remember that the opposite of sharing is stealing, right? So we are here to share. Don't be attached. Don't think of anything as yours or mine, or she was my student, now she goes somewhere else. No, she is a human being. She is her own individual. Like, she doesn't belong to anyone. So I try to always let that go, right? Honor the uniqueness of who you are and just really let go of that concept of yours or mine. It just doesn't exist, or at least it shouldn't exist in the yoga space. Whew. All right, a lot of good ones in Chakra 4. I really enjoyed this discussion. All right, so the Chakra 4 demon, oftentimes it is grief. So grief is an easy one to kind of understand for the heart chakra. Just when your heart is broken, that's the feeling of grief. Like, oftentimes when we are grieving, we feel as though our hearts have literally been shattered, right? So that is a clear example of how that emotional self can be felt so deeply in our heart. You know, it's an amazing thing. But for our purposes today, I'm going to talk a little bit about negativity, which is another Chakra 4 demon, right? So any imbalance that occurs in our heart chakra can create feelings of negativity and just negative thoughts and feelings. So in yoga, we are really trying to like find freedom in our ability to respond differently, right? That's what changes a lot when we practice yoga, is that we create this like pause before we go back into some habits or reactions that aren't necessarily ideal. So creating that space is just a really important facet of the yoga practice. But it's very hard to create that space and to alter your response when you're feeling negative, you know? So there's a wonderful quote in the Yoga Sutras, or one of the sutras rather, in book 2, sutra number 33, which translates to, when disturbed by negative thoughts, opposite, meaning positive ones, should be thought of instead. So this is such a simple thing that can change your whole world. Whenever you have a negative thought come into your head, immediately, as quickly as you can, replace it with a positive one, right? That's straight from the historical texts of yoga, the spiritual texts. It is from the Yoga Sutras, and it is so powerful, and it is so simple and easy. If we can create that pattern in our minds, that when we notice those negative thoughts happening, right? So the first part is the awareness, like having this awareness of your negative thoughts. And then when you immediately implement the strategy of replacing it with a positive one, I guarantee you your whole life is going to change. So it's just a way to control your mind, to obstruct the thoughts that you don't want, and to invite in those opposite, more positive thoughts. So take that with you, right? Take that with you. Replace those negative thoughts with positive ones. That could be something that you do even before you teach, right? So work on that practice, have that meditation that you're, you know, replacing those negative thoughts with positive ones. But other things you can do before you teach, since the color of the heart chakra is green, associated with nature, go outside, you know, and just be in nature as much as you can. Wearing green clothing is another thing that can instill a little more feelings of love and compassion in your teaching, as well as your way of being, right? So very simple, but so effective. All right. And last but not least, poses to include in the 4th chakra sequence. No surprise that there's a handful of back bends in here, but also Gomukhasana, cow face pose, associated with the 4th chakra, and Anahata Asana, that puppy pose that we talked about. Actually, we didn't talk about it, but Anahata meaning the heart chakra. So this is literally the pose of the heart chakra. Matsyasana, fish pose. You can see that elevation of the chest and the heart in this one. Ustrasana, camel pose. Urdhva Dhanurasana, upward facing bow. Very much, you know, heart opening and just exposing that vulnerability through the heart. Kamatakarasana, wild thing pose. Nadajarasana, Lord of the Dancers pose. And then Marajayasana and Bidilibhasana, cat and cow pose. Those are great poses that you can quickly include in a chakra 4 inspired flow. which would be basically your heart opening flow. Love those. All right, so I learned from the first couple videos that if you want to connect with me, giving a visual representation of how you can do that may be helpful. So you can access me in any or all of these places. My email, lisaDanaMitchell@gmail.com. My Instagram is LisaLease411. On Facebook, my personal account is Yogini Dana. And then my business page is Lisa Dana Mitchell. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions, if you want any clarity, if there's anything I can help you out with, I would be happy to help. All right, guys. I love being here with you all. Namaste, and I will see you soon.